All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call this special joint session of the Sterling Heights City Council and Planning Commission to order. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation, so please join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dear God, please bless our elected officials. Grant them courage and wisdom to do what is right for all citizens. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right, thank you, Ms. Barra. Can we please have the roll call?
Mayor Taylor.
Here.
Mrs. Sarowski.
Here.
Mrs. Koski.
Present.
Mr. Radke.
Present.
Mrs. Schmidt.
Present.
Mr. Yanez. Mrs. Zayarko.
Present.
Chair Ugai.
Here.
Mr. Rowe.
Present.
Mr. Jaboro.
Present.
Ms. Saru. Nathan Mr. Inks.
Present.
Mr. Kopp.
Present.
Mr. Garapi.
Here.
Ms. Wright.
Present.
Ms. McGill.
Present.
All right, thank you, Ms. Barra. And I understand Mr. Weekai is the chair and deserves the respect, but you're getting demoted today, unfortunately, Pashko. So unless you want to run the meeting.
You know, once a year I can accept that.
Understood. Once a year. All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Barra, and thank you to council members and planning commission members who are here tonight for this joint session. As all of us know, every 5 years, the state law requires that the city review and update its master land use plan to address the current and future land use and development of the city. The city planning department and its planning consultants at Giffords Webster have been working diligently on revisions to the master land use plan, and tonight is the next step in that process. And the purpose of tonight's meeting is specifically to focus on the major and minor neighborhood support districts, or what we call nodes, as they are currently called within the city. So these areas include many of the city's major commercial and neighborhood corners outside of the corridor areas already under consideration in the master plan. In most cases, these corners are under some sort of distress with vacancies and overabundance of parking. Status quo will likely perpetuate a continued decline. So we're hopeful that tonight's discussion provides some direction on how best to address these areas in our new master plan. We've allocated about 2 hours for this meeting. So without any further delay, I'd like to turn it over to our city planner, Dr. Jake Parcell, to begin the presentations for this evening. Dr. Parcell.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor, members of council.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
So one more thing. We're in a new building, we're in a different format, and I forgot about approving the agenda. So this is going to be, this is approval of the agenda by both the city council and the planning commission tonight. So I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Koski.
move to approve the agenda.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any discussion? No discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda is approved. And now, Dr. Parcell.
Thank you, Mayor Taylor, members of council, members of the planning commission, and the public. I want to thank you all for coming here. One of my favorite events that we are doing for a second annual time, our joint meeting with planning commission and city council. Mayor Taylor said we're currently in the midst of updating our master plan, which is a requirement to the state of Michigan every 5 years. We're moving forward this year with a rewrite of our plan so we can take the success of our last decade and capture the momentum moving forward to accelerate and provide the highest level of services and development for our residents and our business community. The planning and development process does take time, but the efforts of this process have been notable in the city of Sterling Heights. Since the early 2000s, Sterling Heights has been attracting development that is leading the way in the state of Michigan, bringing in businesses from across the city, from our commercial centers to our industrial corridors, despite threats to development and to our city such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Some successes to set the stage as we move forward to highlight what's been done and where we plan to go moving forward include Lakeside, our flagship redevelopment, which has been thoroughly described in the previous 2017 master plan and discussions far predating that document. The beginning of a large-scale revitalization in our North Van Dyke Avenue district, including new attainable housing, the improvement of existing retail, public art, recreational amenities, streetscape improvements, and more, which has been well documented in our 2021 North Van Dyke Avenue Master Plan. Additionally, throughout the city, we have seen major intersection redevelopment at key nodes and intersections, such as 15 Mile Road and Van Dyke Avenue, also Ryan and 15 Mile Road, M59 and Shaner, as well as areas throughout the North Van Dyke Avenue that have been documented and established in our 2017 master plan as traditional mixed-use nodes. The city continues to be a destination for new residents, as evidenced by over 100 new single-family homes being constructed annually, resulting in a well above average owner-occupied housing percentage of 76%, one of the highest in the metropolitan area and in comparable communities. The city continues to invest in public property, setting the tone for private property investment as well. This includes upgrading our right-of-ways, city buildings, parks, and roads, as evident in our visioning plans 2030 and 2040. Tree preservation and large-scale replanting efforts, improved stormwater management standards, and even more sustainability efforts have been outlined through our award-winning sustainability plan, and a current comprehensive overview of how to bring electric vehicle infrastructure to the city has been established through our EV master plan. And all of this is to say that we are taking our master planning efforts to the next level after what has been a very successful foundation. We're excited about what we're seeing moving forward and what we'll see in the next 5 years through the development of our current rewrite of our master plan. We believe that this document will be a flagship document that fully encapsulates what we've seen in our North Van Dyke Avenue, the lakeside redevelopment, our sustainability efforts, and at every intersection within the city, while refocusing our strategies on how to revitalize and redevelop areas in need of updating and to keep our goals in line with current socioeconomic conditions. But that brings us to today. We're focusing largely on our key intersections throughout the city, which have been identified in our 2017 master plan, and what to do as a strategy moving forward. These exclude areas that have already been established in other master plans like the Lakeside City Center, North Van Dyke Avenue, and the Van Dyke Corridor. And to move forward, I'd like to introduce Jill Baum and Andy Amott from Giffords-Webster to discuss our key intersections, how to refine our approaches, and how to move past the one-size-fits-all mindset, how we categorize these intersections, and new innovative methods to support our neighborhoods and businesses alike.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Parcell. Thank you, Mayor Taylor. Thank you, members of Council and Planning Commission. My name is Jill Baum. I'm a partner at Giffords-Webster, and with my colleague Andy, we've been really enjoying working with you, working with the Planning Commission, and building on some of the successes that you've already had in your community. As Dr. Parcell mentioned, tonight's focus is going to be on our key intersections, our nodes. We did send ahead a pretty complete packet of information. There was a lot of information in there. So we're going to go through some of that together with you tonight. We have some interactive questions like we have with the Planning Commission. We did have 2 previous modules, study sessions with the Planning Commission. The first one was on housing. The second one was on the economy and the workforce. Those we had interactive questions within our discussion, and we'll have a couple of those for you tonight. So when we get to that point, just to get yourselves prepared, you've got a little time. I think everyone has at their tables or in the audience for folks who are here the directions to participate. And this is just, if you go to menti.com on your phone, you'll enter in this code. And when we're ready for it, you'll be ready and you can participate. And we'll show you this again when we're ready for that question. So tonight we're going to discuss our module, our nodes module, talk about existing conditions, planning best practices, case studies, and some conclusions. But then there's a big part of that, that's our Q&A, our discussion. So this is about really rethinking our currently built environment. And it looks like there's a couple people who have already logged on. They're giving us some thumbs up, so we appreciate that. We always like the encouragement. So sometimes it's helpful when we're thinking about the future to take a quick look at the past. How did we get here? What is the evolution of our built environment, and predominantly thinking about the suburban development that happened after World War II? Many of our commercial strips that we see here and elsewhere in our region and across the country, really, these are commercial strips that were made for convenience. We were really all about serving people in their car, traveling between home and going someplace else. So the more neighborhoods we added, the more strip commercial we added for those new customers, and they were all going between home and somewhere else. Somewhere else had tended to be our downtown, our major urban centers. But as jobs moved out of the downtown area, people stopped going down there, and then they were just going between suburbs, essentially. We created new malls that weren't major employment centers. They didn't have housing, but these commercial corridors that we had still served as both convenient access for goods and services that were built for the car. So our highways continued moving people out to the suburbs. And we had an interesting provision in our tax law in 1954 that allowed for accelerated depreciation of buildings to a 7-year period from 40. And so what that did is that spurred really a significant construction boom in the suburban areas that went until about 1986 when that was ended. So what did we see? We tended to see things like these. Strip centers, we've had drive-throughs, numerous freestanding stores, bountiful parking, a lot of driveways to individual properties, signage that kept getting bigger because we had to compete with our neighbors, wider roadways, multiple travel lanes, and a lot of sameness from one community to another. As we moved into the 60s and 70s, we had freeway interchanges, we had a lot more visibility there, a lot more growth in those areas. The late 80s, we started seeing big box development and category killers like Bed Bath & Beyond. Those became anchors then for our shopping centers. Those required even more parking, more asphalt, more travel lanes to respond to the congestion that we were building. In the 90s, we changed some of this in the recognition of people feeling like these areas were kind of void of vibrancy and life. They kind of were missing the downtown. Downtown started having a resurgence, and we started modernizing into lifestyle centers, which were closer, if you know any of those, that had that old downtown pattern of development, but still featuring a lot of parking, and many of those, most of those were created without housing and job centers, so they really weren't functioning as a true downtown area. So meanwhile, we had older strip commercial development continuing to function, and this is one of our big challenges that we run into. It's very hard to justify redeveloping a property when it's still generating income. We have many of our commercial strip areas are built with long, shallow blocks that back up to single-family residential, and that also makes them hard to redevelop.
Thank you, Jill. Moving on to cover some existing conditions and trends in the city. We generally looked at these intersection nodes and offer a little bit of analysis on how these are currently built out. So some of the land uses that you consistently see in these intersections are large commercial strip centers, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of square feet. Big box retail, big box chain pharmacies, auto-oriented uses such as car washes, gas stations, service centers, repair centers, a lot of those auto-oriented uses that entail a vehicle queuing to pick up something or to get a service provided to them. Also a lot of medical office or some general professional office as well. So the way that a lot of these sites are built out, as Jill stated, there's a lot of sameness. They're kind of built to the same cookie cutter type of portfolio for the most part. A lot of them have huge seas of parking lots. They're way overparked. I'll get into that in a moment. But they also lack pedestrian connections from the public realm into the private development, such as the building's entrance. A lot of times you can't get from the public realm to a building entrance all safely on one pathway. Also, these are buildings with huge setbacks and huge separation distances between each other. again, causing a little bit of a inconvenience for people on foot. Also, the buildings, many of the buildings need facade or structural updates, especially as we get into the 2020s, and many of these built, 50 or so years ago. Jumping a little bit into the public realm, the public right-of-way, you'll see that there are many vehicular travel lanes on the roadways. Many of these roadways are built with 5, 6 lanes, making them very wide and vehicles moving at very fast speeds. You'll see on the photo on the left, you'll see just the plethora of curb cuts a lot of these intersections entail. That often creates dangerous situations, not only for vehicle to vehicle, but vehicle to pedestrian as well, as you see people trying to turn out as fast as they can to beat traffic. And also there's limited to no pedestrian amenities in a lot of these areas, street furnishings, benches. The city is doing a really good job at improving the tree canopy, so it's something the city is actively working on and I think succeeding in a very good way. But there are some notable areas that do need some more canopy, especially on a 90-degree day, as we've seen a lot of this summer. So jumping a little bit into the parking observations we made, I do want to note these are observations made through Google Earth imagery that is available to the public. So we looked at about 24 examples of imagery at particular sites. And we zeroed in on one of these commercial strip centers in one of these nodes, the one at DeQuinder and 17 Mile. It's about a 24,000 square foot commercial strip center. It has about 14 suites. Most of them are barbershops, beauty shops, and small retail stores. And it's kind of your generic setup of commercial uses overall. We found that there are 186 total parking spaces on site. We found that about 57 vehicles are parked on site on average, making up only about 31% of the parking lot being used on average, which ends up calculating to be about 26,000 square feet of available land that could have been available for other uses and purposes or site improvements like green space or like another business or another housing, small-scale housing building or whatnot. And out of the observations, 67 spaces occupied were the highest we ever observed. So more often than not, it's well under 50% occupied. And now I'm going to pass it back to Jill momentarily for some best practices.
Thank you. Trying to keep it interesting by having both of us do some of the discussion. And one of the things I think it's good to note too at this point, as we've looked at some of those existing conditions, is to note that people developed those properties based on what the rules were at the time. They knew that they had people coming by car. That was really the only option. So they wanted to make sure they had plenty of places for them to park and do their business. So there's nothing here that isn't seen in many, many places throughout Southeast Michigan and all over the country. So we just want to kind of make sure we point that out. And as we shift into thinking about a new way of development, mixed use is something that comes up as really kind of encapsulating a lot of what we've been talking about so far, even with the Planning Commission. We've talked about housing, we've talked about the economy and the workforce. We've also had our sustainability workshop back in July. These are all things that come to play when we think about mixing uses. We're offering the flexibility of being able to do more than one thing at a time. A lot of the reason that our landscape looks the way it does is because our historic zoning codes required a separation of uses. We thought we had to keep everything far apart from everything else, which means everybody has to drive wherever they go. And now we're realizing that, there's a better way to do things, and that can be through a mixing of uses. in areas where we think that's important. So why would we plan for that? So we know that we can, by creating a walkable, vibrant community, we can be contributing to a higher quality of life. Some of these areas can really generate a strong sense of community as well, which also gives people that civic pride, that feeling that they're in a really special area. Increased accessibility. If we're allowing for people to walk about in these different areas, then we're able to then support people that have different ages, maybe for children or older members of our community, as well as people with different abilities that may or may not be driving. We also are looking at enhanced sustainability. We're reducing parking, reducing the heat island effect. We're reducing the amount of stormwater, while also, again, if we're maybe able to rely a little bit less on the automobile, a little bit more on walking, that's also helping with sustainability too. Economic growth, we can boost local businesses, create jobs, and increase property values when we're concentrating our development and allowing for more of it in an area. And also increasing our housing supply. And as we talked about at our first module, that's really important, and providing a variety of housing options to meet the diverse needs of the community is really good. In some of our documentation, some of the reports that we were reading, the research that we were doing, and some of this we did include in your packet for you, the Urban Land Institute, ULI, developed a Healthy Corridors report. And they looked at 4 factors of communities that can be improved through redeveloping with a mix of uses. So they looked at transportation, economics, health and safety, and equity. And then within each factor, they identified several indicators that can indicate how healthy the community is. So if we think about transportation, our indicators might be street design, how dense or how well are they designed, transit options, is there a proximity to jobs, bus stops, rail stations. Obviously that was not going to apply here, but other kinds of transit, microtransit perhaps, car use. Economics, looking at vacancy rates of properties, job density, commercial jobs per acre, and land use. And then thinking about health and safety, looking at the proximity of grocery stores, looking at air quality measures, traffic safety, so looking at crash data, and then equity, providing local opportunities for people who work and live in the same area, same census tract even, affordability, and looking at some of the income segregation as well. So we won't get into this now, but there are some of these metrics and some of the other ones that can be established today and be incorporated in our master plan today as we look way ahead to our implementation section that we'll do at the end of the process, building in some measurements and some metrics so that the next time we look at our plan in 5 years, we can look and see, okay, we said that we wanted to increase housing affordability, and we gave these 3 measurements. How are we doing in that way? Have we made some improvement? If not, why not? If we have, that's awesome. Let's keep going and see what else we need to do. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Sean, actually. We're going to change it up here.
Thank you, Jill. Again, we need a vision for these tired corners or tired nodes and stuff, and it takes time to implement that vision. We'll go over a few slides on some of the steps that usually take place when you revitalize these tired, underperforming nodes or shopping centers to really assist and help the owners, business owners, really thrive and get the most use out of their site. For instance, we'll progress through. This is, a shopping plaza or commercial plaza in any town USA, okay? You have a sea of parking, you got a lot of big box commercial centers. As you know, over the years, a lot of the commercial centers, a lot of shopping with the, onset of Google, those have been struggling and stuff, which basically, translates into struggling shopping plazas and stuff. So an existing shopping plaza, one of the first things that communities can do to help spur and spur development is to do some street improvements possibly. So a lot of landscaping, streetscapes and stuff. The city's doing that already along many of its corridors and stuff. The developer or the owner can also include some other low-cost improvements to the site by adding a few features, small features, possibly, you could consider that, we got a pointer here that works. The building in the center, some type of gathering place. You got a plaza or a nice green space, another area for a gathering place. So it starts to, get that vision going and stuff. It looks like something's happening in this site. The mixed use, again, the vision is provide better options, more options for the developer to utilize an underdeveloped land, and this takes time. So as you can see, a lot of it takes place up front, closer to the road. You're trying to get the businesses closer to the road, closer to the sidewalks, connecting it to not only the sidewalks, but also bringing those stores closer to the road, so when people are traveling by, they can see those businesses. If there's a retail or if there's a nice restaurant and stuff, they'll see that activity. They'll see things happening there. Again, it's revitalizing the place. This takes time. Since you can't really build outward as much, a good way, again, to have the developer or the property owner get the most bang for the buck as you go upwards. A thing that a lot of businesses, restaurants, retail are looking in these nodes or in the area are residential. So you're trying to mix not only your commercial, your retail, your restaurants, but a key component is including that residential component, getting a higher density of people in these areas to help support the commercial businesses. And as you saw up front, at first that took place up front, revitalization up front, then it continues in the back, whereas you have a few more, you could have more connectivity with streets, more sidewalks. You can see in the back there's more residential again. You got more of the mixed use up front. The residential in the back, again, is helping support the commercial and the mixed use up front. Again, this takes time. This, for my experience in developing a downtown, it took, and it's still happening, over 22 years. And with these types of nodes, it's going to take 22 years. It's going to be an investment for the property owners and to some degree an investment for the city to help improve streetscapes. And at times when improving streetscapes, if you can include and if there's a need, that's also a good time to start improving infrastructure as you want so that you don't have too much disruption through the time period and stuff. But, Jill.
Excellent, thank you. So in the report that we sent to you, we had identified a couple of different planning publications, and as we had done that research on there, and as we went and did research on some of the case studies that we'll show you in a moment, there's a few things that really jump out at us from all of the research. We talked about sustainability and how the redeveloping the strip corridors really embodies sustainability. We know that that's a very key value to the city of Sterling Heights. The next thing, and Sean was just getting into this too, phased implementation and patience is key. This takes time. The corridors did not become tired overnight, and they don't get revitalized overnight either. And it's really hard. And it's hard because you look at things and you say, well, why is nothing changing? There's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of education that needs to take place, and there's a lot of investment, and people are very careful. So those are things that are unfortunately, we can't just snap our fingers and make things happen. Investments are needed in both the public and private realm. So we do talk a lot about what happens on the private property standpoint, but there's also the other side of the sidewalk, if you will, that needs attention as well. And there's going to be a measure of public infrastructure investment, as Sean was starting to say as well, that's important. The importance of transit cannot be overstated. Transit comes up in almost everything that we read, and it doesn't mean that it needs to be a light rail line, but it does need to be some kind of a coordinated, intentional, available, and accessible transportation network. So supporting clearly still cars and vehicles, personal vehicles, because that's the way we get around right now. We can't ignore that, and we can't avoid planning for that. But looking at other things that we can be doing, looking at bus systems, looking at microtransit, that smaller shuttle bus type systems, bike lanes, sidewalks, pathways, so that people have a choice in how they get around. It's not a one-size-fits-all for mobility. And then considering appropriate land uses. One of the things that we'll talk about in a little bit are thinking about the desirable land uses that we want, thinking about our housing and the things that people need to support living and or working in the same area. And then not allowing the things that we don't want, things that don't contribute to that sense of vibrancy. So with that, we'll kind of go into, was that our first question already? Oh, okay. Ooh, our first question already. So we'll give people a second to get ready.
I will note also, we've provided note pieces of paper for everybody at their seat. If you're not able to or not comfortable using Mentimeter, feel free to write your answers there. And then you can submit them to myself, Jill, or Andy afterwards. For members of the public, these sheets of paper are available with pens over by Mr. Fox in the coffee refreshment station.
All right, so now we're going to have you think a little bit, do a little visioning. Think about successful places you've been, places that feel vibrant, attractive, and comfortable. And think of, jot down here 4 things that contribute to that feeling of success.
Shopping centers were all lined with trees, shrubbery, so they were appealing. Thanks.
Okay.
Of course, they didn't have heated sinks. There's snow slowly in the house.
What do you mean fold up? Maybe it will. Maybe Alexis gets.
Attractive.
We've got some good feedback here. A lot of people like their shade.
Meditate.
Wonder if it's because it's been so hot.
I'm writing on my paper.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm a paper.
Yes, thank you.
I can get you a notepad that you can write on and give to us after if you want.
I like robust greenery.
Just
Sorry.
No, you're good. We have a notepad for you.
I'm good. I just need that. I got that crap.
You're a pencil.
Shut up. I'll draw it like that.
Trees, walkability, variety of options, commercial housing, outside patios, golf course. Nice. Bike. That's awesome. Thank you. All right, now we're going to do the opposite end. Oh, think of unsuccessful places you've been, places that feel tired, unappealing, and uncomfortable. And can you think of 4 things that contribute to that? Hot. Monotonous. That's a good one. Yeah. No other people. That's a good one. Yeah, a feeling of emptiness, empty stores, empty parking lots. Green space. Hard to see from the road. That's good. Yeah, I think we think of a lot more examples of the unsuccessful places. We're still cruising on these. Excellent. All right, good, thank you. All right, we will move on to the next part of our conversation, our case studies.
All right, so we looked at a few other suburban communities throughout the country, really. One of them is in the state as well, but we looked at a few places and we want to just discuss a few implementation actions that some of these communities took. So our first example we want to talk about is Shoreline, Washington. This is a suburb on the north side of Seattle. In the early 2000s, they started planning for a lot of road right-of-way improvements to their heavy corridor that transverses the city. It's a state road. It's called Aurora Avenue, and it has an average daily traffic of about 40,000 to 45,000 vehicles. So to put that in terms of Sterling Heights, that would be about the traffic that Metro Parkway east of Van Dyke to the east border of the city sees. So that portion of Metro Parkway is very similar to this corridor in terms of traffic. So very heavily trafficked corridor. And in the early 2000s, the city worked with both the county and the state to just try to spruce up that corridor a bit, provide pedestrian amenities in the right-of-way, make it more pleasant to walk, to bike, even to drive, make it more pleasant, add landscaping along the right-of-way. They even added a bus lane a bus rapid transit lane to the side of the roadway as well. So they planned for a lot of that in the early 2000s. A lot of that was actually implemented in about 2006. And then what happened was they started seeing a lot of development attraction, a lot of ideas come into the community for how do I build something here? How do I open my business here? How do I build housing for people here? And because of that, they ended up, the city ended up adopting a small little area plan called a community renewal plan for a special intersection of this corridor. And what they did was they started off with a vision that said, okay, we want multifamily mixed use here. We want to establish a critical mass of people here to then shop at this existing commercial strip center, the Central Market, and add some other small businesses to the area as well. So as you can see here, this was part of the plan originally. That building, Alexin, is built. You'll see that in a moment. And what this was you'll see examples of how this was a shared effort between both the city government and the private developers. So in its implementation, you'll see that this street, the side street, Westminster Way, is very auto-oriented, huge pavement areas that pedestrians need to cross, multi-lanes. They have slip lanes, which are notorious for being very dangerous to pedestrians because they speed up the car as fast as possible as they turn. Then moving forward, this is what it looks like now. So in a 2023 street view, actually a year ago, you'll see that they have solidified their blocks. They've built they've created hard corners that are are a starting place to kind of build the streetscape. And the city worked with them on that. As you'll see in the bottom right corner, the city cleaned up the right-of-way as well. So it was, they had a private developer willing to build a large-scale multifamily. They had people willing to develop and tame, in a way, this strip mall. And there's a really shared effort to make this a very much more attractive place. We're going to jump over to College Park, Maryland now.
This is another community, another side of the country, actually. College Park, Maryland, they started their planning really in 2002. These aerials aren't like the greatest, but I think what you can see here is a lot of empty space out in the front, a lot of underdeveloped parking areas on a fairly uninteresting roadway. By 2024, there's been tremendous improvement. This has been going on for over 20 years in this area, with a lot of multiple family residential, new development, and they are seeing a lot of, if you look at the ground level, a lot of redevelopment that aligns with their planning efforts, and seeing private investment that has been leveraged by some of the public projects, like traffic calming, traffic safety measures, as you see here, more improved crossways, lighting, and some streetscape, more trees along those areas as well. That's a pretty significant, it's near college, University of Maryland. So there is, that's their main anchor at the end of this roadway, or not the end, but in the College Park, at least it is. So it's a very interesting, long, ongoing project. This is one of their more recent projects with 70,000 square feet of retail, 393 market rate rental units, and 2 parking garages, because we still can't get rid of that. They do have transit that runs through College Park, and one of the other kinds of transit is a small trolley that runs between this area and the university. Going more local, we have an area that many people are familiar with, the Big Beaver Corridor. Big Beaver Corridor study was completed in 2007. The vision at the time was for Big Beaver to be transformed into a world-class boulevard, and those are all capital words, world-class boulevard. And the corridor study, the document itself, really explored, well, what makes a world-class corridor? Some of those concepts we included in the memo, but one of the things, and I think it was Sean that mentioned it, the idea of bringing the buildings up close to the street. Why do we do that? The Big Beaver Corridor Study Report explored why do we like that kind of building form, and it has to do with our sense of comfort and safety and security when we think about the width of the roadway versus the height of the buildings. And so when we have too close together, too high of buildings in a smaller roadway, we might feel a little bit claustrophobic. But if we have, conversely, wide expanses of open areas and buildings way off to the side, we can feel kind of unprotected and maybe a little bit unsafe. And so the idea was that this proportion could relate the height of the buildings to the width of that roadway and really be creating this very interesting, unique place in the area. Now, what happened along at that same time was the advent of, I think, fast casual dining. It sort of hit right at the right time. But again, this document was prepared in 2007. Later, you start seeing some of this infill development. And if you look at aerials, which I think we have on the next, I don't want to go too far ahead because I like this image here. Yes, okay. You can see that a lot of the former empty parking spaces in front of those big office buildings that were built back in the 70s and 80s is now occupied by places that people who work in those buildings can go and have lunch. One of the other really nice things about this, even though this doesn't really look like this yet, that could be something that still changes and evolves over time. But some of the interesting components of this are, I think, the quality of the architecture. So we've got different building materials, We have some articulation, we have some facades that move back and forth. It's not all one monotonous building. We've got different windows in there. A lot of the businesses have their outdoor dining areas, and to see people sitting outside on Big Beaver, as somebody who grew up in Troy, I feel like, wow, that's really different. That's something that we didn't have here before. If you look at one of the biggest multifamily, and that was one of the things that really was the missing component of this, you can see some of the new multifamily going in here. This is just east of Crooks Road. So you can see this aerial from 2009, I think it was, and then this one from 2024. So you can see this big new development. In here, you'll start to see, and in the imagery, it's not as easy to see, but you can start to see some of the frontage landscaping changing. You can, again, see some of those places for people, the outdoor dining. You'll see the beginning of more of a grand entryway here, but a lot more of the green space and plaza-type spaces for public engagement. And one more quick one. This is Woodstock, Georgia, trying to cover the country here. This is an area that started planning in 2002, following some suburban-style development in the late 90s that people started to feel might get out of control. So this was their area of leading into a downtown area, but on their suburban strip. They did a revamped plan in 2008 that they really wanted to focus on their community input for. And in this area now, they allow a variety of uses. They have done a lot of public investment infrastructure, a lot more green space, traffic calming. They have on-street parking here. And you can kind of see it's pretty much the same width of roadway there, but they've reallocated it so that they have a smaller area for pedestrians to have to cross with traffic. They've got a variety of uses. They've got multiple family residential. They've got affordable units. They have units for seniors. They have townhouses. They also have some small lot, single family, some courtyard homes. And they also have some neighborhood parks that are tucked in there as well, and other programmed spaces like amphitheaters. So how does this all tie in with our master plan? I'll let Andy talk about that.
So in the memo, I do want to clarify, we did use the terms city, village, and neighborhood, but we do want to maybe alter the naming convention to perhaps a district as that moderate sized node per se. So I just want to clarify that. Looking at the key node intersections here in Sterling Heights, I think it's important to consider the fact that not every one of these is the same. There's far different contexts in each of them, different conditions that have built these key nodes and intersections, different levels of control for jurisdiction in terms of right-of-way. So not every one of these is the same. And we want to go through a few of these examples. A city center node would be something like Lakeside, something that is large, a large regional draw, something that has its own really grid and street pattern in itself, and one that, you know, is a very large scale redevelopment project. A district node could be more so something that is maybe 22, 25, 15 acres, something that is mid-sized, has multifamily, mixed use, perhaps up to even 4 or 5 stories, if appropriate, has public space, parks, offers a variety of services and amenities for its residents, not only in the node, but also the neighborhoods proximal to it, and offers a variety of housing types. So not just multifamily mixed-use apartments, but it can be things like townhouses, stacked flats, live works, quadplexes, sixplexes, those type of missing middle housing as well. And then on the smallest scale, we bring the example of the neighborhood nodes. So that's something that's still supporting the residential neighborhoods there and around it. But you're a little bit more strict on the uses that are allowed. Maybe you're considering those direct service and convenience store type of uses that are more, someone's everyday service or goods. And you're kind of looking at just a lot of good site design that cleans up the area, enhances connections in between sites, and makes it pleasant in that manner. So we do have a few examples here that we kind of want to tack onto the case studies in a way. The Woburn Village was a redevelopment project in Massachusetts. A big box commercial strip center was cut in half, which is interesting. The one half still remains, but then on the other half, they said, let's make this a place that's pleasant, has some placemaking features, and is going to serve a residential population right there. So they offer some green spaces within it, have some outdoor cafes within it, have some one-story commercial uses, enhance connections in between uses, and have a 5-story residential building to the rear. That's a 22-acre site. And then another example is the Maxwell in Alpharetta, Georgia, which is perhaps a neighborhood example. They don't have any huge residential buildings. All of their residential buildings are 2 stories max. They're stacked flats, perhaps on 4 or 5 units above a commercial ground floor suite, and then townhouses in the rear. So here with my pointer here, the commercial uses and stacked flats are just right here, and they have some green space. It's really pretty. And then as you move to the southeast, this is all just townhomes, row houses, attached condominiums essentially. So it's a lower scale node in an intensity scale, but it's still offering goods and services to its residents. And we're going to jump into the Mentimeter questions again.
All right. So we had in the packet some information on those key intersections, our nodes, and this was also part of a workshop element that we did back in June at our land use workshop. We asked folks that came to give us some of their feedback in terms of building heights and mix of uses, public spaces, and some of the amenities. Those were indicated there on the sidebar. In most cases, most people felt like a mix of uses would be what they would like to see at all of those nodes, so that kind of makes it easy. We did put in here, you can see the average annual daily trips, 20 to 40,000 on DeQuinder, under 10,000 on 17 Mile. So that's a less, lower traveled area. Some of the things that people were looking for would be pathways, bus stop, and bike racks.
I didn't ever pop
Kind
of
of popping up over our text. That's all right, I got my text here, but yeah, I'll try to remember to say that. Nice, all right, that seems to be the, oops, I don't want to cut anybody off. So we made our recommendation that you kind of see in the side there based on the average annual daily trips and somewhat the size of those nodes too. So we tend to, I think, agreed with the general thought on this one. Excellent. Should I go? Sure. All right, next one is Ryan and 17 Mile. Same situation on 17, under 10,000, and on Ryan, 20 to 40,000. vehicle, average annual daily trips, 2 to 3 stories when we asked about building heights here. And then again, as we'll say on every one of them, mix of uses, public spaces, pathways, and bike racks. This one's feeling more neighborhood, I think, in a lot of ways.
Running away.
All right, that one's looking pretty unanimous, well, not entirely, but pretty close. We'll move on to the next one, Ryan and 18 Mile. We've got a little bit more traffic on 18 Mile than we do on 17. Here, we're about 10 to 20,000. This is per SEMCOG data, too, I should note. All right. Our next candidate is Shaner and 19 Mile. A little more traffic. We've got 20 to 40,000 on Shaner, 10 to 20 on 19 Mile. All right. DeQuinder and 15 Mile. Here you've got 20 to 40,000 trips on both DeQuinder and 15 Mile. Here, public participation suggested 1 to 3 stories. All right, we're halfway through. Now we got 15 and Ryan. Again, 20 to 40,000 trips on both Ryan and 15, 2 to 3 stories. Is what we heard at that open house. Good. Shaner and 15 Mile. All right, we have 2 more to go. Dodge Park and 15 Mile. In this spot, oh, I didn't change the traffic counts. Sorry.
That area needs a lot of work.
Sorry, Passion.
You explain that, Mayor?
All right, and our last one, last but not least, Shaner and 14 Mile. This is the new one that came out of the public input. right. Thank you all for contributing your comments on that. As we roll into the next part of this, we just have 2 slides left, and then we'll stop talking for a little bit. But we wanted to share sort of like what do we do with this information and what comes next after the planning process. In the master plan, we will lay out the key elements for the future zoning. In the state of Michigan, and one of the reasons why we have to do our plan, review our plans every 5 years, we don't need to change them, but we need to review them, is because we want to make sure that our zoning ordinance is still in line with our master plan. We want to make sure that we have rules and regulations that support the long-range vision of our community. So as we go forward, we want to be thinking about what are the kinds of zoning considerations that we would want to make. We want to make sure that we're zoning for appropriate land uses, regulating for integrated site design, and handling of nonconformities. That's a big issue. How do we manage those moving forward? Zoning should not be optional if we really want to see transformation happen. Flexibility with respect to land use is important, and site and building design should create and support an appealing, comfortable, and functional public realm. And that's pretty much what happens. Oh, we'll get to the next one. So with those, what do you see as barriers from an implementation standpoint? All good feedback here. Change is hard. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Oh, do we want to do that one? What policy or regulatory changes can be made going forward? So some of the changes effectively for land use policy and private regulation through zoning. Some ideas and suggestions. Flexibility is good. So again, this master plan doesn't result in us rewriting the zoning, but what it does is it sets out the standards and the framework and provides guidance so that when we do the zoning, we know what we said during the planning process. All right. And if we go too fast and people have more things to say, you do have that sheet of paper that Dr. Parcell mentioned at the beginning. So we don't want to cut you off, but we know that you probably want to talk about too. So we also have other options to incentivize development. Did you want to talk about these? Or do you want me to just keep going? Okay. Some of the things include identifying capital improvement projects in the city's annual capital improvement plan. Those would be things for our planning ahead for our public infrastructure projects, our streetscape, other infrastructure, road improvements. Creating a policy for tax incentives. If that was something that you wanted to do, it's helpful to have a policy to outline that so that everybody knows what's expected. Developing a pilot project on city property or with a willing property owner. Allowing pop-up uses as a means of activation. This is an example of an underutilized parking lot where they put little shipping containers. They made green roofs on top, and those are little places that are open. That's easy, relatively low investment, but it can start changing the mindset of people when they don't think of anything else to do with their parking areas. Oh, we could put in some little pop-up shops or some food trucks. Public-private partnerships, collaborative efforts to reduce the burden of capital, where we're working with the private development community and public resources to make improvements. Those are just a few of the things that we can be thinking about. Any other thoughts on how the city can incentivize a champion for this kind of development? Some of those you already have provided in that last one, but if there's anything else. All right, thank you. I think that is, we'll let you keep noting or jotting down. That is effectively our last slide. The next one is just a thank you. I'll turn that back over to Dr. Parcell, if you would like to wrap it up or transition.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Mr. Boehm, sorry, I always mess that up, for the presentation. I think you'll start to see the culmination here of our summer of public engagement and building on the effort that we've received from the community, which has been immense and highly rewarding. You see here, we're starting to move away from our one-size-fits-all approach to our intersections, helping find ways to help our neighborhoods and our business communities thrive together, coming up with creative solutions that you'll see at year end when the draft of the master plan is out. So we're incredibly excited about moving past this engagement that we've been able to collect, getting feedback and opening up discussion, and then ultimately presenting you with our draft of the plan moving forward. And for that, I thank you for your engagement thus far and look forward to hearing your responses to our presentation. Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Parcell. I want to thank Jill and Andy as well for their presentations today. We appreciate the information that went into that. All right, so I'm going to open it up to the City Council and Planning Commission members for any comments or questions. Anyone like to go first? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to, okay, Mrs. Sironsky.
Let me start it off. Usually I like to go last, but I'll start it off. I'll crack the ice here. And I just have a couple of comments. First of all, thank you very much, Giffords Webster and all of you. Beautiful presentation. I like the interactiveness. This was actually very good. As adult learners and teaching as a nurse, I teach a lot of adult programs to my staff, and it's very important to engage your adult learners and people in the audience or people in your group. Otherwise, you lose them. And so I don't think, got lost. I appreciate that very much. And so it was very helpful and informative. But also, it was nice because I'll digress a little bit because I've got the floor, so what the heck. I grew up in Lansing, as many of you have heard and known, a small town actually outside of Lansing, Grand Ledge, but in the late 70s, early 80s, so I had that late 1979 to 82 depression or recession, where we saw Lansing really go downhill, really far, and it fell apart tremendously, even though it was a state capital. I could see, and as a high schooler and an early college student, could see that it was really going into very there wasn't a lot of growth. A lot of people in my high school didn't even go to college, and they just went off to find a job. Work was hard to find. And so to see this and to see, it really made me think back. So how did my city fall apart, or how did the big city fall apart? And what was falling, and what did I see, and what didn't I see happening? And so this is very important for me to look back, how we're planning our city now, and to make note of what they did and what I saw happening back then, and to know what we don't want to happen. Now, Sterling Heights is a much younger city than Lansing, and it's important to note what we don't want to happen and what we don't want to see happening. We're not in a recession, truly, compared to that at least. And I want to make note of that. But I want to make sure that we are taking the steps to prevent any type of decline. We had lots of closed up buildings back then, closed up businesses. So this is important, very important work that we're doing. And so just a couple of notes that I want to say. A lot of our nodes that we're talking about, and a lot of these these nodes that we want to develop are really up and down Van Dyke. And so what I do see is important, and I know this will take time, and this is, as we said, will take a lot of patience, but first and foremost for me is that right now, while we have all this construction going on, of course this is not going to happen immediately, but Van Dyke is a thoroughfare. Man, people hit that gas pedal and they're going very quickly. So before we are able to really have some walkability and some development of these nodes, with a lot of pedestrian traffic, I think we need to bring that speed down. So we need to do that. I know we're looking for ways to do that with traffic calming and other ways, but we have to bring that speed down before any real development gets going, because it's the safety factor. I've brought this up before, and I'm going to really stick to that. And then the other thing truly is, I know that Van Dyke is the thoroughfare through our city and then off to M53, but the volume of traffic is also extremely high. So we need to be able to somehow dissipate some of that volume, especially as we get to North Van Dyke. It is a disaster right now, and I'll be honest, it is, trying to get through that while we're dealing with M53 having construction. So that is something that we're working on, but we have to work on that, in my opinion, first, before we go and get these nodes. We can start working on the node development, but those two things, the road and the traffic itself, is extremely important. So that is something that I know that you're going to work on, Dr. Parcells, and I appreciate that. And I know that we need to get those, so that's what I want to really point out. Another thing, I did see that up there, no drive-throughs. And as a mother of 4 children, when I had to pack the kids in the car and go anywhere, if I didn't have a drive-through, my day was going to really be bad. So although I know no drive-throughs in a lot of our nodes, drive-throughs still have a value. Drive-throughs still are important. So I don't want to say no drive-throughs, but maybe decreasing drive-throughs and diminishing drive-throughs in some of our more highly pedestrian areas. So that's something I just want to say I think is extremely important. And right now I'm going to, that's going to be my words for now. I do reserve the right to maybe rebut any questions or any other comments, Mayor Taylor, but I'm going to that there's so many numbers, I'm going to wrap it up for now.
Okay. Hopefully you don't need to rebut
Hopefully I don't.
any
Yes.
comments. All right, anyone else like to speak, questions, comments?
Mayor Taylor.
I'm not sure. Was it Mr. Inks?
Yes.
Mr. Inks.
Just, I guess, a couple broader questions and then some more detailed questions. Through the chair to Ms. Boehm, and I apologize, I've been pronouncing your name incorrectly, I think, at every meeting. One of the arguments that we have heard in opposition to mixed-use developments is that we already have a lot of vacant commercial or retail buildings in the city. And so that's a sign that we don't need more commercial, or that mixed use isn't going to work in Sterling Heights. But I think looking at vacancy rates in traditional commercial buildings doesn't reflect what vacancy rates would be in mixed use development, because the type of commercial developments that we've gotten from typical suburban development under Euclidean zoning is different than what we're going to get under mixed-use development. So I guess what would be, your response to concerns from residents that trying to do mixed use here is just going to lead to more vacant buildings in the city?
I think it's a good question. I think you kind of answered it by talking about the different kind of retail spaces that are being built today versus the kind of commercial spaces that were built 40 or 50 years ago. The format is different. So where people are shopping is, they are shopping in places that are places where they are going to have a little bit of an experience. We know that while there's a decline of some kind of retail, there is a experiential-based retailing that people do want to take part in. We're still, I believe, buying 85% of our goods in person, so completely eliminating retail from our streets isn't realistic, and it's not going to happen. So I think building on that ability for people to do things while they're shopping is really one of the important things in an environment that's pleasing and attractive and safe and comfortable.
All right, thank you. And then a couple more detailed questions. One of the difficulties that we've seen when we've had developments come into our traditional mixed-use development nodes is that developers have not been enthusiastic about entering shared parking agreements. And even though a lot of the developments that have come in have had reduced parking, it's still probably over parking the district as a whole if we have a multifamily residential development come in next to a retail. So what are the tools that the city has to be able to encourage developers to engage in sharing of parking so that we still don't end up with an overparked mixed-use district?
Parking is one of the bears of doing this, especially if we recognize that we still are in large part driving to our places and back and forth. Having a mixed use, though, maybe we're having a little bit less. Maybe we have fewer people that need to drive if we're trying to make places more walkable. But certainly with shared parking, recognizing that in a downtown area, we have public parking, right? Businesses don't have their own individual parking spaces that they own. You could move to some kind of in the district or the neighborhood nodes, move towards some kind of a co-managed parking area where really it's kind of pooled together, looking at then sharing the expense of maintenance and taking care of those things. Really making the shared parking truly shared parking so that we're not just adding up all the parking from one use and the other use, and now we're making a lot of bigger areas, but really making those reflective of the nature of sharing. I think those are some of the things that we can be looking at when we're looking at, and then reducing the parking standards to begin with too, so that we're not requiring as much parking.
And then a similar problem that we've seen is, hesitancy to add pedestrian amenities. A developer who's putting in a building doesn't have an incentive to put in a plaza for people who are walking through the entire district because that's less room that they can develop on. So do you see more of a, is it going to have to be that the city has small amounts of properties in the district that we turn into small pocket parks? Mm-hmm. Or do you think that there is a way that we can realistically incentivize private property owners to, just have some sort of shared pedestrian amenity?
Definitely. We kind of think of those as our places of interest. So it might be a couple of benches. It could be a water feature. It could be a little parklet, like a couple of swings or something like that. It could be some public art, just something that is making it place interesting, giving people something to look at, something to stand around and maybe talk about, and making sure that that's part of it, but that they're integrated in with the site and the building design, because having like a bench thrown out front of a building isn't, that then people point to and say, but nobody ever sits there. Well, no, they're not going to sit out in front of the building when it's on, 19 Mile and there's cars flying by. Like, give it some thought and integrate it in with the site so that it makes sense where it is. And I think those are the keys, like be looking at where they're being placed on sites.
Then, related to that, I have a suggestion for Office of Planning as we're updating the master plan itself. I think it would be helpful to have an inventory of all the properties that are owned by the city throughout the city. At the Sustainability Commission meeting this past month, was brought up that the city actually owns a small parcel at the 15, and I believe it's Ryan Road, traditional mixed-use development node, that I didn't realize the city had owned before. So it would be helpful as we're updating the master plan to identify what properties we already have at our disposal that we might be able to turn into some sort of pedestrian amenity. And I think having that information in a map in the master plan would be helpful. And then my final point, I want to agree with Mayor Pro Tem Sarowski that, I certainly don't think we want to eliminate drive-throughs throughout the entire city, and drive-throughs have their place. We're not going to change the auto-centric actions of the entire Metro Detroit community. But we can reduce or eliminate drive-throughs strategically in certain small portions of the city. And I think that's what is likely going to be necessary. If we look at eliminating drive-throughs, big box stores, gas stations, and other auto-centric, pedestrian, unfriendly uses in our areas of the city where we want to develop mixed use, and keep them in areas that we are going to allow to remain more auto-centric, that's going to lead to better developments in our mixed-use nodes, in our mixed-use corridors, and it's also going to address some of the concerns that I think residents have that we're trying to change the entire fabric of the city. And that's really not what I think we're talking about here. We're talking about strategic changes in strategic locations. And that's all I have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Inks, Mr. Weekai.
Mr. Mayor.
And of course, I'm kidding. 15 in Dodge Park, my favorite area of the city. Where I moved, when I first moved into Sterling Heights, that's where I was.
Yeah, here's the second city hall is nearby there somewhere.
It is, I've heard that. Mr. Weekai.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good to have all of you here, and great presentation by Jill and Andy. You actually did an even better job than you do at.
Boshko, can you talk into the mic?
Well, I thought I was loud enough. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and great presentation by you, Jill and Andy. You guys did a better presentation than you do at our planning commission meeting, and so that tells me you didn't leave your best at our planning commission
Is it
meeting.
because it was
You saved it for
shorter?
the city council joint session. Okay, so I guess I have a question for you. See, look, with the great presentation, it all looks good up there on the screen, and that's all. We all want that. The reality side is, who brings that to reality? Is the private sector, the developers. That's who's going to bring that to reality. So you've done all these studies with these cities that have done this. What kind of partnership do the cities can create or build with the developers so we can bring that? And maybe we don't have to wait 20 years for that to come to reality. If we can steal a trick or two from their playbook, and maybe we can make it sooner. So with that, if you can share anything that we can do to build that bridge and build it sooner.
That's well, I was going to say the $1 million question, but it's probably much more than that, right? But I think one of the things to note is all of the public infrastructure improvements that all of those communities have done. So there is a measure of public investment that needs to occur too. So in that way, you are, as the city, trying to set the table for developers to understand that, okay, I see the city's investing, the city's improving what this road looks like. I can now feel like I can invest my private money into a wholesale improvement of this property because now I know what's going to happen around me. I can see that if I go, the people on both sides of me are going to do it too because we see the private or the public investment that's happening here. So that's one thing. But there's also tax increment finance capture. You're not strangers to that. You've done that before, but that's a tool that's at your disposal as well, a corridor improvement authority or something like that. You also have business improvement districts where there's money that can go and be reinvested into those areas in both the TIF and in the business improvement district. then there can be other kinds of sharing. You mentioned, Commissioner Inks mentioned the public land. So if there's a piece of property that the city has and it's can be worked into a private development, well, that could be something that we're working on together. If there's a plaza maybe that the city wants to do a park or a plaza there in that location, maybe we're working with the private developer that's around that to collectively improve that together, where we are incorporating both that plaza and their development into one new development. Those are a couple of things. We will have that information in the master plan document too, because that's half the battle, is understanding what kind of tools we have at our disposal to make these things happen.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Rowe, thank you, Mr. Weekai.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the phrases I wrote down on this piece of paper here at the very beginning of the presentation, it says, phased implementation and patience is key. Boy, that's a lesson for us all. I mean, and I say that because we all know the Planning Commission has, in trying to push our vision for these nodes, is that we're getting pushback, and it's been a real challenge. And in some we've made agreements, but others not so much. So we continue to have a gap between what we want to achieve and what the developers want to do. And I just want to take off from our esteemed chair's comment about working with the private sector. I think we need to, a couple things. One, we need to have, I don't want to use education, right? Because our development community is they're very smart people. But we need to engage them into the benefits of what we're trying to achieve with our vision and the mixed use focus that we have, and get their buy-in. And perhaps what we need to do is to begin by finding a champion or two in the development community that would be willing to be a partner with us and helping us to realize our vision. And I'm not talking about the Illiches, I'm not talking about the Gilberts, and I'm not talking about the Penskes. That's downtown Detroit. They're doing their thing. I'm talking about in our community, and who might be some of the developer champions that would be willing to engage what we're trying to do and be a partner with us. So I don't have a question. I just want to offer that as a suggestion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rowe. Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just an observation. A lot of the stuff that Mr. Weekai and Mr. Rowe said is kind of along the same lines as where I'm going. But, what I think I perceive as an adversarial relationship with the developers and landowners in Sterling Heights as far as how we're going to get to where we want to go. It's going to it seems like the attitude is we're going to do this despite them. We're going to stick to our guns. We're going to make sure that we decide things that always tend towards what the city's master plan is. And I think that one of the biggest problems that we've got is we haven't brought them in from the very beginning, right? I don't see any of those folks here. And I know who they are. They haven't been invited. They don't have a space at the table. They find out in a meeting that we're going to turn them down for something that, would have flown right by 5, 6, 7 years ago. We need to get them involved at a very fundamental level. We haven't done that, and we've reaped all of the rewards that you would expect to reap from that. We've had people that are suing the city. We've had people who have just flat out refused to do the sort of development that we want to do, and it's not going to get us to where we want to go. We need to engage them with the benefits, is what Mr. Rowe said. How about they come in and help us understand what would work for them from a business standpoint? One of the comments that I saw up on the screen when we were doing our input was, not having such a short-term ROI focus. Well, that's how business operates. You have to be able to make business pay back between now and the 20-year timeline or the 30-year timeline or the 40-year timeline that it's anticipated that this will take. They got to eat too. they're,
Attention, the community center is now closed.
was it something I said?
You're now cut
We
off.
make our own rules.
Okay, very good.
So sadly, we have to stay. Mr. Carapika, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding, continue on.
Yeah, sure. So I just want to make sure that we don't lose our focus on the idea that this is something that we're trying to do for the city. This is something that we're trying to do for the residents, for the developers. It's not an adversarial thing. We need to make sure that they understand that they are still a welcome part of our community, that we want to make things better for everybody, that we're not trying to dictate stuff to them that doesn't work, and that we have an interest in what will work for them as much as we have an interest in making the city sustainable. Those things can all mesh together, and it's a very important thing that we do that. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Garapi. I just did want to respond to what the initial comments you were making. So I think part of the issue is that, well, let me take a step back. Your comment about, the developers sort of getting to the end of the process and then being in front of the planning commission or in front of the city council, and then hearing something that they maybe didn't expect. For nearly every project that gets to the city council or the planning commission, those developers have been meeting with Dr. Parcell and his team repeatedly. They've had multiple iterations of plans going back and forth with planning. They've talked with legal. They've talked with city administration. Many instances, they've talked with me or other members of the city council. And so there is a long process, and then eventually it gets to the policymakers or the decision makers, and we're not in those meetings. So I think that there may be some disconnect there, that it's a process is unfolding without the people here around the table, and then we're the ones that ultimately matter. And obviously no disrespect to Dr. Parcell and his team. You're certainly very important and you matter. But when we make the decision.
There's a Hannah Lau in the building. Could you please come to the front desk? Hannah Lau.
So we're the ones that make the decisions, and, we might have differences of opinion then. So they're going to hear something different at the planning commission meeting from us or the city council meeting from us than maybe they're hearing in the pre-planning meetings. And I'm not sure what the solution is there. I really don't know, but you bring up a point. You want to respond?
Yes, please. I think that that's an excellent point. You are quite correct that we are not privy to what's going on between the developers, the landowners, and planning prior to these things coming to us. But we have an opportunity now. We have an opportunity while these things are still in the talking about it phase to bring these people on board en masse, in general. Have a developer consortium, have everybody come in, do an event, explain where we're headed, get the feedback from them. We seem to be doing really good at getting feedback from the residents, or at least we're trying to. They're here, at least. Some of them are represented. I don't see anybody from the developer community, not that I'm aware of anyway.
Okay. Dr. Parcell, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. I agree that, it's important to engage all aspects of the community. And I think actually my chair of my planning commission pointed this out while we were working on our first survey. When we sent out our surveys, it became a discussion of, I own a business, I don't live here, why should I participate in the master plan? So what we've done since this process started, thanks to Ms. Riska, is receive contact information for every licensed business in the city. We've worked with the chamber. We've distributed, from me personally, probably a total of about 25,000 emails inviting people to open houses, inviting people to participate in our surveys, inviting developers and business owners to the table. But ultimately, it's an invitation. That's the best opportunity I have to provide input, is the links to our engagement. We have had prominent developers show up to our open houses, provide incredibly valuable feedback, and talk to us throughout this. We have sent out notices, personalized letters to every business for every ordinance change and public hearing and meeting. So we're doing our best. I welcome ideas and input. It's obviously been a process that has evolved since January until now, in large part thanks to feedback from business owners in the community to engage them more. But it's constantly evolving. Nothing is done on our side in the Office of Planning that's brought to a public meeting without notice being given and our awareness trying to be raised at the highest level. So it's something we really work on. We've made sure to include business owners with multiple receipts and multiple emails through every survey that we've done and every open house we've done as well to try and get people to come and provide their feedback and engagement.
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor, to Dr. Parcell, would you say that maybe apathy is a problem?
I wouldn't. It's the purpose of public, or some of the challenges of public engagement. It's really difficult to find, in a city this large, find a tactic that works for everybody or an opportunity that works for everybody. But it's something that we've tried to evolve and adapt to. We've taken account technological differences, providing slips in every water billing that goes out to businesses and residents. We posted around 100 notices and QR codes and met with businesses on site between Mr. Keenan, myself, Ms. Richards, Mr. Fox, Ms. Miller. So we've done our way to engage, but it's a challenge in community engagement in this process nationwide. You know, it's very much an offer of your time and volunteerism to participate in items like this, such as you are all appointed volunteers in Planning Commission. But it's a difficult challenge, and I think we've really tried to step up to the plate to meet it.
Thank you, Dr. Purcell. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Garapi.
Mayor
Mrs. Schmidt.
Taylor, thank you. I just have a couple of comments. So, and some of it is kind of redundant. I guess where I'm feeling a lot of frustration is the developers coming before us want 3, 4, 5-story apartment buildings. These little nodes that we're talking about are more than just that. So how do we get these developers to want to have a variety, you know, townhouses, row houses, little houses, pattern book homes, condos, single-family residence less than 2,000 square feet? I mean, those are affordable houses. That is what our community is looking for, not just, I need 5 stories or I'm not going to make enough money. And I've heard that more than once from developers that come before us. So that's where my frustration comes in, is how do we get them to buy into what we want our community to be instead of them coming in and telling us it's going to be this much so I can make a profit tomorrow instead of what you want. That's my frustration. And, you know, patience. I couldn't, I put patience down as one of my things up there. You know, Lakeside, I'm very excited to see if Lakeside ever happens in the next 20 years, which that's what we were already told when we all went to Colorado. It took them 20 years to develop the exact same scenario that we had here. So patience, it will come, hopefully, but my biggest frustration is trying to get those developers here that want to make more reasonable and a variety of housing. We just don't want all these high rises. There are other options. There are options where people actually buy into the community, condos and the smaller homes, townhomes that they can buy. That's what I'm looking for. So that's where my big frustration is. It just seems like over and over again, we're getting these 3, 4-story apartment buildings. And there's so much more out there. And our community deserves better than just these high rises. Other communities have them. So why don't we? So that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Schmidt. Mrs. Sorrell.
Oh. Mr. Mayor, thank you everybody for a great presentation. I think it's kind of, it's good to kind of see the examples and some of the challenges others faced and the result they had. I couldn't agree more. I mean, we are trying to transform the city for the next generation, right? I have 3 adult daughters, and when I look at them, their lifestyle is very different than what we had, right? We are trying to transform from an idea where we had a district where, you know, people go for office, for work. We have factories, we have, you know, shopping malls, and then we have coffee shops, and then we have homes, right? At home, we just wanted, you know, place to go to the park maybe, or walk on the, you know, all I wanted when we were building a house, like make sure there's a sidewalk so we can go for a walk in the evening. But with the new generation, they are looking for something, you know, technology is changing, and generation is changing, and the way business is done is changing, economy is changing. So I give everybody kudos for continue to push forward. I mean, as a healthcare leader, I know, I mean, I guess I'm used to it. Looking at Mrs. Sarowski, these kind of things don't happen overnight, and I think once we have one area where we can actually start the concept, you know, beautiful concept where people can see what we are trying to do, it might have some traction. The other thing I was going to say is somehow if we can engage younger generation, younger, you know, I'm thinking more like, you know, college age or 20s, 30s, you know, my kids, they're all in 20s. Somehow if we can get their attention, to get their feedback, like what do they want, and maybe they can help support and, you know, open up our mind to some other ways to crack the ice in a sense. So I'm optimistic. I think we are doing a great job. I've been living in the city for, you know, my whole life, adult life, and we have made some great changes, and I'm really proud to be a resident here. And I think we will get there. So small concepts, small changes, but eventually down the road, I see it happening. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Radke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, a couple things. I thought one great part of this was an excellent presentation. One great part of the presentation was how so many of our plazas are overparked. We've all known this, but I think the data really reflects it. They never really exceeded 30% of their capacity. So they're at 30 or 40% capacity. It gives a lot of arable land that we can now use to redevelop. It shows you that when people come in and say, it's not going to have enough parking, they're lying. We have enough parking. We have too much parking. We have too much parking almost everywhere. So one thing we should really focus on in the nodes, I think, is severely slimming down the minimum parking requirements. I would like to eliminate them, but at this point, because we don't have lots or any other ability to push people to, I don't think we can eliminate the parking minimums. But we should do everything in our power to slim them down, because one of them said something like it had 100 spaces and only 40 were full. That's not a good use of land. It's not valuable land. Each parking spot costs about $10,000 worth of value. And if it's going dormant, it's creating heat, it's causing problems. I really think we need to explore that. I also, when talking about nodes, I think a lot about, I live at 15 Mile in Van Dyke. And so a couple years ago, I want to say, or a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, a landlord came in and said that the former NBD bank at 15 Mile in Van Dyke, he wanted to make it a Savvy Sliders. It used to be a bank, it has a drive-through. And the planning commission pushed back and said, no, that's not our vision for the area. And the guy told you, like most developers do, they lie. He said, well, this was never going to get developed. I'll just let it stay vacant for 5, 10 years. No one ever wants it. Because I think that the developer's thoughts on the property did not match the market. He wanted value that didn't exist there. His price was too high. As soon as the planning commission turned him down, or didn't even turn him down, he just didn't feel like he got what he wanted. he withdrew his application and sold it, and now it's going to be a jewelry store. They're remodeling it right now. It looks excellent. And I think that shows you that you don't have to always go with the first proposal, but you have to take what you think is the best proposal. Because developers will always say, I've never seen a developer before us, and I've been in office now 7 years. I've never seen a developer come in and say, you know what? This one is kind of so-so, but it's worth a lot of money to me. Maybe let me go back to the board, I'll redraw it. I'll say, no, this is all I got. I need it right now. Another example of this, which is not in a node, but was in the Van Dyke Mixed Use District, was GM Live, which used to be a Target. And we had Mr. Burgari right in front of us, and he said, all this can be is an Amazon distribution center. And the city council said no. And he said, well, it's going to stay vacant for 20 years then. It's never going to get filled. And within 2 years, it was what is now GM Live. Developers lie. It's our job to stick to the plan, and we have to realize that their incentive is not what our incentive is. Their incentive is to make money for themselves, which is a good, noble thing. We live in a capitalist society. But our job as a city is not to seek profit. Our job is to do what's best for our residents. That's why we do any number of things, from garbage pickup to policing, that generates no profit for us as a city. But it makes the quality of life of our residents better. We should be striving to improve the quality of life of our residents. So I think about those two things whenever I see a developer come in and say, this is the only way this can work. This is the only thing I can do. And I think that that's just frankly false. And I think we're seeing it. A great version of this, a case study in our book here, is on how Troy has developed the Big Beaver corridor. Now, is it perfect? No. Is any corridor perfect? No. Big Beaver is still, I think, 50 miles an hour. But they are seeing infill development. They are seeing mixed-use development. They're seeing several of those going in there. And to what someone else said earlier, you know, we are, with nodes, with corridors, we are saying you can't put your thing right here, but you can put your thing a half mile or a quarter mile off the corridor, and you're allowed. And if you're in a car, a quarter mile isn't that far. If you're a pedestrian, it's a long way. But if you're in a car, it's not that far. And that's what Troy's been doing. Troy does not allow drive-throughs in their mixed-use corridors. They don't have drive-throughs, but they still have development. No one's not building there. And if they do, if like Starbucks decided that they wanted to expand and Troy said no, Starbucks went literally about a third of the mile down the road, outside of the corridor. And that's where their new business is. Businesses will find a way. We need to believe in the plan. Businesses will find a way. I just want to touch upon one more thing. Adversarial relationships with landlords. Look, if they wanted to take part in this process, they would be here right now. Just like residents who want to take part in City Hall come to council meetings to speak. They don't show up except when they want their things approved. It is what it is. But the idea, we don't have an adversarial relationship. They sue us or they don't. People sue us or they don't. I mean, we've approved developments and then gotten sued by developers over some of the details of the approval. Being for or against anything doesn't make a difference. Developers are going to do what's best for them, and they should. That's the way the society works. But we need to do what's best for the citizens of Sterling Heights, not simply someone's pocketbook. That's all I have right now, Mr. Mayor.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Radke. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor,
Mrs. Kosky.
thank you. Through the chair to Dr. Purcell. You're familiar with what's going on in Rochester Hills?
Everything that's going on in Rochester Hills. Go ahead, Dr. Parcell.
An amount of it, yes.
I'm talking about their mixed-use success. Livernois and Auburn Road?
I am familiar with it. Mr. Keenan may be more familiar with it than I am.
Yes,
I can actually talk about it probably a little bit too. We helped the city of Rochester Hills out as well with their master planning and some of their zoning work too.
Well, I'm talking about the 2 apartment buildings and the retail office building. The apartment buildings, I understand, are like 3-story, and the retail office is like a 2-story. What did they do to make that a successful development? What I've seen is the design is really attractive. What else can you tell me that we could do to be successful like they are?
I think 2 things. It starts with a good master plan. a good vision, a good cohesive vision for what is wanted, what's desired, and also good regulatory rules to make sure that what is developed is what, or that your guidelines are setting forth what you'd like to see. And they have both. And they've revised their zoning a couple of times to make sure that they're hitting it right. It is hard to do it right the very first time. I think here, there's whenever you're trying something new, you don't want to upset the apple cart, and so you add it in. And there's always opportunities to continue refining that. And I think that's what the city of Rochester Hills has done over time. And again, those are things that didn't happen overnight. They do take a long time to get people familiar. Commissioner Rowe was talking about getting people, and I liked, I think that you said familiarized, that's what I was thinking instead of educating. And I think Councilmember Radke said the same thing about making sure that people understand our vision. It's shopping it out, and they communicate that in Rochester Hills with the development community as well. Making sure that people understand the vision, they understand why the community wants to have development look the way that it does, how they get through the process, and just continue to do it. It's interesting because when we're all doing this process, we think that everybody knows what we're doing. We've been talking about it for a long time. Surely everybody knows what we want to have here, but people don't always. They don't have everybody's got demands on their time, and they don't pay as much attention to things, even the things that we think they should be paying attention to because it's important. We have to help them out and help them become more familiar with what our vision is, help them understand what our zoning expectations are, and then get them through that process.
Well, that's what I would like to see our planning department do, is to put it in writing, tell them what we want. This is the vision that we want, and it's going to be 2 stories if it's going to be commercial and retail. It's going to be a maximum of 3-story if it's going to be apartments. You're going to need X number of square feet in order to put together a project as such. And if we tell them what we're looking for, maybe we can get somebody to buy into it and do it. And I don't really think that it works if you say, well, this area and this area and this area is going to be strictly mixed use. I think it should be something where if the developer wants to do a mixed use, let him come in and say, I would like to do a mixed use in this area, just like we do with the PUD. You know, what are our rules on the PUD? If somebody wants to do a development that is a PUD, what do? They come in and they say, this is what we want to do. So that's my thought there. If we give them some guidelines and let them present their project to the planning department, and then we can say, yes, that'll work there, but no, it won't work there, but it might work over here. Give them a little cooperation. Because I have been in Sterling Heights since the year after it became a city. We moved out to the sticks. Well, it's not the sticks anymore. So I've seen it grow, and I wanted to continue to grow in the right direction. But everything changes. We're constantly changing. So we have to go along with that. But if we expect people, developers, the residents to change, we have to tell them what we want to change and what we want to change to. Lakeside can be our downtown. We didn't have a downtown. That's why we had the little strip malls on every corner, because people needed their groceries. They wanted to do their shopping. So what do? You went down to the corner, strip mall, gas station on one side and CVS on the other side. But of course, that's changing. Well, maybe we can take those corners and turn them into your mixed use. But let's get the developer to buy into it and come do the project. And all we have to do is tell them, these are the rules. This is what we want to see. And I'll tell you, I don't want to live in Boston. I don't want to live in New York. and I don't want buildings 6 stories high at the edge of the road, because we talk about buildings coming to the corner. We talk about Ryan Road. Ryan Road used to be a 2-lane. It isn't anymore. But you got to remember that the children that live at 14 and a half mile, the subdivision there, they go to Grissom eventually. And when they go to Grissom, sometimes they miss the bus. So what do? They have to walk down Ryan Road sidewalk. And if you get your buildings right to the edge of the road, CVS as an example, we've got weeds that grow in that little drain there. And if they're not cut down, cars coming out of CVS, kids walking down the sidewalk, you could eliminate a few. So we've got to have some setback. If you want your 5-foot, your 10-foot sidewalk, you have to have some setback for your buildings. And, well, I've got some other thoughts on that, but not here. But I would like to see if maybe we can take a look at what Rochester Hills is doing and maybe come up with some suggestions that might work for Sterling Heights, because their project looks really, really nice. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Konsky. Mrs. Zarko.
Well, I guess the first thing on your agenda, Mayor Taylor, will be to talk to Mayor Barnett when you see him the next time and find out what's going on in Rochester Hills. First of all, we can all say that there's always room for improvement, and it's always been my feeling that Sterling Heights competes against itself to be a better place to live, work, and raise a family. So I think we can all agree on that. I want to thank you for all, for everybody that participated and took the time to do this great presentation tonight. I understand where these nodes are. I guess my question would be, does each node have to have the same restrictions? Could one node be an entertainment district, another one be a housing district, or does it have to have the mixed use in every single one of them, but maybe indoor recreation instead of, shopping? So I guess I'm looking at the nodes is, would they each have their own personality, and it's how they blended in with the community where they're at? And we could think of the one that is at 15 Mile and Shaner now, where they're putting in 2 strip malls, I believe, that will actually, if we develop the Red Run Park, will be close to a trail, and you could put a bike shop there, or somebody selling running shoes. It's something that as they use that facility, whether it be the park or the trail, they would be able to go in and get their bike fixed if something goes wrong. So those are things that I'm interested in, is how do we attract or entice maybe a business owner to come in and blend in with that node as we build it up. And I think part of that is needing developers that are innovative. I mean, right now we can claim that we have the very first robotic manicurist in the state of Michigan. And it's because a business owner said, hey, I'm going to try this. And I think that's what we need as far as development or business owners coming in, is somebody that's willing to try something new, because if they don't, you're just going to get the same thing over and over and over again, because this is the way they've always done it and this is the way they always want it. So I guess the other thing is I have to respect all the people that are here that helped, that put the presentation together. I know that you're all smarter than we are. And if anybody doesn't think that, then I'm sorry, but we pay you a lot of money to give us the best advice that you can, whether it be from a development standpoint, from the master plan, or even the legal part of this, is we need to listen to what you're saying also, whether it be here or at any other meeting. So pretty much, I think it's about all I have to say, is just to be open-minded about this, knowing that, we're always going to need automobiles, so, we can't wipe them out completely. We're going to need parking places, maybe not as many. But I think the last thing is, I work with two really good volunteers on Wednesday afternoon at the library, and we were strangers that became friends. But my friend Mary tells me almost every other week, because she watches our meetings, that the person who sows the seed does not always enjoy the shade. So that's why, and I don't remember what country the proverb is from, but it makes sense. As we start sowing these seeds, we might not be here to see when it's complete, but somebody's got to make the decisions in order to move forward and make us a better place to live. Nothing further.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Zarko. Anyone else? Mrs. Wright.
Okay, just a couple of things. Councilwoman Schmidt had mentioned the fact that we have all of this missing middle housing, and there is a need for it. And we've seen that it's being put up in other communities around us. Have you approached those developers to see why they haven't invested in Sterling Heights? And that's through the chair to Dr. Purcell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, if I may. We have so housing is pretty much at the forefront of Mr. Keenan and my mind, Mr. Castor's mind, Mr. Richards, Mr. Fox, whenever we're in a meeting. I think I've pulled up the pattern book guide from MML and the missing middle housing chart more times than I could count since I've started working here. There's barriers, obviously, to doing a development at a lower density based on market conditions, the cost to develop at this time, and there's always going to be different challenges we have to work through. So we do engage on it. We do come up with a lot of creative solutions. If these are feasible or not feasible based on the site, based on what the pro forma comes out to, is a different story. So it's something we plug away at constantly. We put a significant emphasis on this plan that started with the very first module on a housing and market study that we believe is going to be really innovative and completely new to what we have in our arsenal of planning documents that will help kind of shape this path forward and will help us kind of find an avenue to bring these developments to life. So my hopeful and optimistic short answer is that we will be seeing developments like this soon that truly are innovative. We bring it up constantly among ourselves and in meetings with developers, and with the data that we're getting out of this, with the guidance from our consultants here, and with the support from administration, planning commission, and council, we'll start to see these come forth. And I believe that may be sooner than later, and I'm hopeful about it.
Okay, thank you. I also wanted to say, I know there's this feeling or idea that we need to work with developers more. And as Councilwoman Ziarka said, I am not a professional. I'm just here on this commission, so I could be completely off base. But we all work together to create this master plan, and the commission sends it to the city council for approval, and they decide if this is what their vision for the city is. And then as commissioners, we're supposed to take their vision and follow that rule book, that guidebook. They're the ones who are elected. They're the ones who represent the citizens. And so I'm trying my best to follow that. If they say they want X, Y, and Z in these nodes, I guess my problem is why should we work with these developers? We've seen in other communities, Troy, for instance, if they don't want a certain building height or they want mixed use, they tell the developers that, and the developers just have to deal with it. So I think there should be, and I understand, working and telling them what we want and giving them an opportunity to change things, but we shouldn't just give in to these developers and say, well, I think this is the best we're going to get. I think we need to abide more strictly by whatever master plan the city council approves. Otherwise, we're never going to see that vision come to fruition. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wright. Mr. Jaboro? I'm good. You're good? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, thank you to the Giffords-Webster team. Thank you to our internal team. I appreciate the presentation tonight. Just some closing thoughts on my own. When I saw what was going on outside of Seattle, when I saw what was going on outside of in College Park, Maryland, Troy, wherever you go, I think all of these different case studies focus on housing. And it seems to me that housing is the key catalyst in each one of these projects. I've had some frustrations recently because of housing projects getting shot down. I mean, I know that it's not a secret to my colleagues on the city council. I think in order to realize some of the mixed use ideas and to, you know, like some of those slides that said, you know, how do we get the ball rolling? How do we find a champion to champion developer to, you know, be a guinea pig? Do we start small and work our way up? I don't know, part of me believes that we've got to get housing as close to these corners as possible. And we got to get density. And with density and with housing, that will drive it. I'd imagine the reason that downtown areas throughout the country and the world sprouted up organically is because there were a lot of people right in that small area. And so I think to me, that's the catalyst is the housing. And there's also a huge housing need right now. So it's, to me, I think that's a key component to it. And my 2 cents is that I think I think it's great to have these plans, and I think that we should keep those front and center. However, I would like to see us try to push forward projects that aren't bad projects, like not letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. That until we can show that density works in Sterling Heights and density works in areas like 15 in Shaner, like 15 in Van Dyke, until we can show that it works there, I don't see a lot of developers out there clamoring to come in and completely redevelop large shopping centers. So, and that's sort of what it's going to take. If you look at, like in the packet, we've got some really interesting, unique ideas about 17 in Van Dyke, for example. But, you know, who owns that shopping center? Are they going to sell the shopping center? Are they just going to close it? No, the shopping centers are probably doing pretty well. They're probably doing fine. They're making a lot of money. The people that own shopping centers are collecting a lot of rent, and, you know, they're not necessarily going to buy into our vision. So I think that we have to, when we get projects where we can put housing close to these nodes, we should do it. And we should try to be somewhat accommodating to developers and let them know that we welcome your partnership. We want you here. Show them the ideas that we have, but listen when they make the business case that it might not work for them in the short term. Because, you know, on the one hand, you can say, look, this is just what we're going to do. We're going to create this plan. We're going to stick to our guns, and no matter what happens, this is it. And then my concern is, well, okay, well, what if that shopping center owner just says, well, fine, I won't do anything. Then I'll just continue to own this shopping center. I won't invest in the parking lot. I won't invest in the facade. I won't invest in the common areas. I won't invest in making it more pedestrian friendly. I won't invest in making it less auto-centric. I'm making money and it's fine. We encountered that in Illinois when we went to Chicago in 2015 to talk to the mall owners at Lakeside Mall. And we came with grandiose plans. And we met with them in their big boardroom and showed them all of our plans. And they said, that's all good and well. Lakeside Mall is certainly not an A-plus mall. And they basically said, General Growth Partners said, in our portfolio, it's one of the lower end malls that we have, but it's making money. It's doing fine. We're cash flowing. We're doing fine, but do you have any idea, they said, Mayor, how much it costs to replace the tile there, replace the handrails, replace the HVAC? So they're basically, the message was, we're just gonna run this down into the ground. So if we don't collaborate and look for ways to work with our development partners, and we just tell them it's our way or the highway, they're going to take the highway. And that's how I feel. So I think that we have to get what we can, and build momentum, and that's the way forward. And one other thing is, I think it's tough, it's tough, like, if you got a developer who's got 2 acres of property, and they can show on paper at least that they can do something like 50, 60, 70, 80 apartment units versus, let's say that they wanted to build 1,500 square foot single-family homes on 60 by 120 lots. Now, they can get 10, maybe 12, 10 or maybe 12 units in there. And so the cost to, the reality is, like, what are they, when they are building single-family houses, they want $500,000 or $600,000 now. So I'm just not sure that that's practical. And I agree with Mrs. Schmidt that would be ideal to have a combination of different housing options available, but I think we do have a combination of housing options. So my feeling is we have to start somewhere, and the way we start is by working with our developers to get housing in these areas and then hope it grows from there. So that's my feeling. Again, I want to thank the Planning Commission members for coming. I thank my colleagues on the City Council. Thank the planning staff, Giffords Webster's, for being here as well, and appreciate the presentation and the conversation tonight. All right, so with that, close that portion, and we will move on to communications from citizens, I do believe. So it's a little bit unique that we didn't really have an opportunity for people to talk about what was on the agenda tonight. So if you want to talk about what was on the agenda tonight, you can. All right? So anybody want to speak?
Absolutely.
Oh, Mr. Romano.
Unless I defer to the gentleman that wants to speak?
Come on up, Mr. Romano.
Thank you. I was paying for the air conditioning, but it must cost a lot of money.
Hey, some of us don't have power.
The building closed at 8 o'clock, remember?
But good evening. Thanks for having me up here. Actually, tonight I'm wearing 3 hats. For those that don't know, I'm a Sterling Heights County Commissioner. I am also a real estate broker for over 50 years, and I'm a resident of Sterling Heights for over 50 years. Let me just, if I may, touch on the developers part of this. And I've heard people speak about, well, let's get, and I say it kindly, let's get some smaller housing, let's get more housing, let's get more single-family residentials. Folks, there's no property out there to do that. You know what the bottom line is, and it always is? It's always about the money. Why would I want to put up, as the mayor alluded to, 12 or 15 houses when I can put up a 3-story apartment building and make twice the money that could be made there? As a commissioner, I'm always concerned of what's going on in Sterling Heights. This is me. This is my lifeblood. As a broker, don't forget, 50 years, I could have moved any place. I had some tremendous deals that I could have taken, some beautiful houses in areas I could have moved to. But I chose Sterling Heights. This is my place to live. This is where I raised my children. They went to the Utica schools. And I've got nothing but good things to say about Sterling Heights. Your master plan, I think, is a great idea. You've got to look vision 20 years down the line. I won't be here anyway, but that's a good idea to have it 20 years down the line. As a real estate broker, what attracts people to Sterling Heights? It's not the mixed use that you have. It's the amenities that we have. And what do we have? Sterling Fest, Sterling Christmas, Dodge Park, Farmers Market, Skate Park, Dodge Park itself, which is the jewel of the county, and I can go on and on. Sterling Heights has all this. That's what attracts people. 135,000 strong, and we're growing. Where are we going to put them at? In the park? They need housing. Who's going to come up with the housing? Developers. What are they going to do? Put up apartments, put up condominiums. I know you don't like to hear that, But that's what's happening. That's what's being done here in Sterling Heights, because we need the room. Now, I realize that some of these projects that they come before you, they stink. There's no other way to say it, they stink. They look like 4-box, and I can name a couple of them right now, but I don't want to start. But anyway, the problem is, again, the housing. So what do? We have the council, we have planning, we have zoning, and hopefully they can curtail anything that doesn't look good. But some of the developers we have are really good. And believe me, I've been around a long time, 20 years on the council. I know what some of the good developers are and where the bad ones are. And right now, today's market, I honestly think we have the best developers around. They're looking to see something that's nice in Sterling Heights, and our planning director makes sure that. Dr. Parcell makes sure that what's being put up is something that's nice. And if it doesn't, we don't get it approved. So we got to keep that in mind. Let's keep the other part that I wanted to talk about even more so. You talk about mixed use. It's not feasible. It's not sustainable. You're talking about using parking area and putting up apartments to utilize the park. That's fine. Now, where are those people going to park at? Because we've utilized the parking spaces to put up the apartments. We've taken away the parking spaces for the businesses. So I don't know what to tell you. As far as a city center for Sterling Heights, I'd love to see that. But I think we missed the boat, and I think the boat has sailed. And I'll tell you why. The perfect spot would have been probably Dodge Park between Utica Road and 15 Mile Road. Look at Rochester. Look at some of the others. Look it up north, Petoskey, Charlevoix. Shopping centers on both sides, little stores on both sides, apartments upstairs. And they're occupied. People like it. They walk downstairs and they go to the parking spots. Today, you put those places up. What are we going to do in the wintertime? You're going to sit out on the table there and shop while you're freezing your dupa off? It ain't going to work because it's just too cold. Michigan has Michigan weather. And the other thing is when you put these apartments up and you have the businesses downstairs,
Hey,
who's going to
Joe?
go grocery shopping? I have time?
Did your light go off?
Yes.
I can't tell.
It did
Oh, do
go
I have
off.
4 minutes? I'm all done?
Yeah.
No, it's yellow.
Oh, it's, she just
I didn't touch it.
she just gave you some more.
No, it went
I
off.
got 6 minutes.
It went off a long time ago. It went off a
2
long
minutes.
time ago.
2 minutes and I'll leave you, Mayor. I never get up to speak again.
Make it like 60 seconds.
Thank you. 60 seconds is good. Who's going to do these small shops? Who's going to shop? You know it right here. What does everybody here do? Amazon, Meijer, Kroger, Lyft, Uber. Nobody shops at these small shops. We've got 4 barbershops at 615 in Dodge Park. 4 barbershops. Why don't we put some mixed use in there, put some more barbershops in? Anyway, I think it's a great plan. I think your master plan is good, but sometimes you have to deviate a little bit from there. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
All right, thank you, resident, commissioner, and real estate broker Romano. Anyone else, communications from citizens? Going once, twice, okay. I'll close that portion. And what's next on the agenda, Mr. Koszubski? That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, no reports, nothing else. So I guess in conclusion, we have a lot of work to do together. I can tell you from my standpoint, I enjoy the partnership we have with the Planning Commission. I know the council members, myself included, pay attention to what you guys are doing, appreciate the service that you guys are providing to the community, and we look forward to continued partnership between the City Council, the Planning Commission, and hopefully our residents, the business community, the other stakeholders, the development community, to continue making this a great city. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Support.
It's been moved and supported. With no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.